what the Navy learned about the great Catalina was passed on to civilian airlines, aiding the inauguration of scheduled trans-Pacific flights in 1936. The highly accurate Norden bomb sight was developed under Navy auspices and became the standard sight for all U.S. horizontal bombing aircraft. The bulky undercarriage of the earlier fighters was eventually replaced by retractable landing gear, decreasing drag and increasing speed. The old biplane gave way to the monoplane, and speeds jumped again. All the development since the First World War, the long-range flying boat, the dive bomber, the torpedo plane, the concept of a mobile task force, the development of tough and powerful fighters, and above all, the superb training of pilots and crewmen were soon called to meet the greatest challenge our Navy had yet faced. Japanese carrier aircraft struck. When the smoke had cleared and losses were evaluated, our proud Pacific fleet was temporarily out of action. Gloom settled thickly over the country, but the Navy's top strategists thanked God that all our carriers were at sea December 7th, and though few in number, were ready to launch their planes in counterattack. Now naval aviation would be given an opportunity to justify the years of its development, the training of thousands of men, the time and money and sweat expended on it. Airmen turned grimly to the task before them. The carriers of the Pacific Fleet launched a series of raids on the Japanese-held islands, the Marshalls, Wake, and the Gilberts. In May 1942, they found and stopped the enemy in the Coral Sea. The Japanese were forced to turn back from their goal, Australia. Despite losses, Naval Air won its first strategic victory and followed it a month later by battering the enemy at Midway. This was the turning point in the Pacific War. The enemy was stalled. Hawaii and the United States were spared attack. Back home, thousands of aviation cadets were headed for action. Training facilities were expanded rapidly as the tempo of war increased. Only the finest could become Navy pilots. Long hours of practice taught exact landing techniques. Some learned the acrobatics essential for fighters. Others mastered multi-engine aircraft, and with their crewmen conditioned themselves for hours of monotonous yet vital patrols. Men were trained to keep the planes flying, engine maintenance, radar, radio. The accumulated knowledge of 30 years was packed into a few months. America was in a hurry. In the Atlantic, the Navy was fighting another enemy, one it had battled before, the German U-boat. Hundreds of Allied merchant ships went to the bottom before the U.S. could organize its defenses. Navy patrol planes joined forces with surface units to range the Atlantic from Iceland to Rio. Back and forth across the Caribbean, too. Searching, searching, searching for the telltale periscope, for the foaming wake, for the shadowy reflection of a submarine just below the surface. Blimps joined the hunt as convoy escorts. But all this was not enough. The mid-ocean areas could not be covered by land-based search planes. The Navy's answer was the escort carrier, born of necessity. These hastily built baby flat tops joined the fleet in 1943, and with their planes teamed with destroyers, eventually scourged the German U-boats from the Atlantic. The capture and boarding of the U-505 by a Jeep carrier and destroyer hunter-killer group climaxed the Navy's action in the Atlantic. At war's end, naval air power had accounted for 99 enemy submarines. In the Pacific, meanwhile, our offensive was underway. Guadalcanal saw heroic holding action by Navy and Marine airmen flying from Henderson Field. The offensive gained momentum with new fighters like the Hellcat and the Corsair, torpedo bombers like the Avenger. Rockets gave a mighty wallop to our Navy planes. Radar came to our aid, too, on shipboard, in planes, and in anti-submarine operations. No longer could the enemy evade us in darkness or in fog. The all-seeing eye of radar would find him, plot his course, and guide our planes in for the kill. The pattern of the Pacific War emerged as one of island hopping across the reaches of the once tranquil ocean. Army and Marine invasion forces relied on naval air to soften up enemy defenses. Assault leaders spotted enemy emplacements, called for air support to wipe them out. Men in the combat information centers aboard ship plotted quickly, carefully. American lives hung in the balance, waiting for help from the floating airfields. Fighters swept over the beaches, sought the enemy hidden in his bunkers, blasted, strafed, burned until the island was secure. In the Battle of the Philippine Sea in 1944, naval air scored its greatest triumph over Japanese carrier aircraft. Now remembered as the Marianas Turkey Shoot, Navy gunners on ship and in the air, and in the space of one day, shot down 400 attacking enemy planes. Japanese naval air was ruined. Its funeral was held at Leyte Gulf. Japan fought back with land-based suicide planes, all the aircraft she could get off the ground. But it was too late. She had been defeated on land, on sea, and most decisively in the air over the sea. Naval aviation had led the way across the Pacific, the Coral Sea, Midway, the Solomons, the Marshalls, the Marianas, the Philippines, finally Okinawa and the Japanese home islands. 30 years of struggle in developing naval air power had paid off in victory. Now the Navy turned to its new job, keeping the peace. The faster and heavier planes of the post-war Navy required a new carrier class, one with a longer reinforced flight deck. The Midway and others of her class were designed as carriers must be, to keep pace with technological advances in ship and aircraft design. For the jets were coming. Squadrons of Phantoms, Banshees, and Panthers joined the fleet. The jet age was here to stay. To keep the peace, an expanded Naval Air Reserve was established at a number of naval air stations throughout the country. Enlisted reservists studied radio, radar, electronics, and jet aircraft maintenance. Weekend warrior pilots filled the skies over naval air stations and participated in fleet operations during summer cruises. Valuable wartime skills were being retained, ready for use in another emergency. The Navy's activities were far-flung in the post-war years. 1946 found a task force in the Antarctic Ocean on a mission of survey and exploration from the air. Planes like this PBM mapped 5,500 miles of the coastline of Antarctica. The next year, the truculent Turtle, a P-2V patrol plane, shattered all previous distance records by flying non-stop from Perth, Australia to Columbus, Ohio. The Turtle set a world's distance record of over 11,000 miles, 55 hours in the air without refueling. Helicopters assumed the observation duties formerly performed by catapulted float planes. The Navy and the Marine Corps used these versatile craft in many ways in the post-war years. New weapons were tested and added to the Navy's arsenal. This launching of a captured German rocket was only one of many operational tests to determine the feasibility of launching rockets and guided missiles from ships and aircraft. The same explosive force was used to power the high-speed skyrocket beyond the sound barrier and into the future at speeds exceeding 1,100 miles an hour. Aided by reserves of men and planes, naval air was ready to strike back the moment the Korean War started. Air attacks on aggressor strongpoints began within a few days, with new attack aircraft and jets going into combat for the first time. Navy and Marine airmen flew round-the-clock strikes to cripple the enemy's communications and transport. Close air support of the troops at the front became a specialty. The concept of carrier aviation, devised so long ago by the pioneers, once again proved a powerful force. Because of the carrier's mobility, naval air was able to attack anywhere on the Korean peninsula. Ship and shore-based helicopters transported men and material in assault support, evacuated wounded to hospital ships, and rescued Americans trapped behind enemy lines. Today, in an uneasy world, the Navy stands ready to repel an aggressive attack wherever in the world it might occur. Carrier-based bombers carrying devastating weapons can attack far inland to strike at bases from which such attacks might originate. The same plane, equipped as a flying tanker, can refuel the shorter-range jet fighters while they are on the way to the target. The significance of this flexibility, the mobile striking power of carrier aviation, is not lost on a potential enemy. Working closely with surface elements of the fleet is the new N-class airship, crammed with electronic devices to find enemy submarines far beneath the sea. Great strides have been made in the design of carriers as well as aircraft. The carrier Antietam, veteran of Korean action, was recently given a completely new look with the construction of an angled deck. Now, for the first time, planes can land from a mission at the same time another strike is being launched from the forward end of the ship. The angled flight deck will be a feature on carriers of the Forrestal class, shown here in this model. Huge fuel storage tanks will enable ships of this class to remain at sea for many months if necessary, without replenishment. The Forrestal and other carriers to come will handle the Navy's newest jet aircraft as routinely as the Langley learned to handle her slow-speed, propeller-driven biplanes. Some of the pioneers of the early days are gone, men like Moffett, Ellison, and Rogers. But new airmen have taken their places, men who know that wars can no longer be won by land or sea power alone. To be effective, sea power must today have one mighty arm reaching high into the sky.